What would you do if you were at an airport and all of a sudden you wanted to give yourself get a massage from an airport, from a massage therapist? Like, you go to an airport, you probably get a massage, you probably see a massage therapist. But what if you realize as a woman that therapist punched you in the face because he was angry at you? That's what this woman, what you're about to meet, says happened. She was in an airport and she was assaulted by a therapist. What was the reasoning behind this assault? And is there more airports, and are more airports being unaware of these cases of massage assaults at the airports? Here's Lisa Guerrero.
All the stress of traveling, frequent flyers like Sadie Colves finds a relaxing massage can be a great way to take the edge off before a flight.
I get massages in airports whenever I have long layovers. I'm literally looking for a massage place.
But she says what happened to her during a layover at this Dallas-Fort Worth airport spa was anything but relaxing.
He was rubbing that area of my inner thigh, and he took his other hand and he pushed my other leg open. He was touching my actual private area. And I literally froze and literally thought to myself, am I going to be raped?
She says she posted these photos of her inner thighs covered in bruises to warn other female flyers.
I'm asking you guys to share this. I'm asking you guys to help me prevent this from happening to any other woman again.
According to prosecutors, the masseuse groped Sadie so aggressively that she couldn't walk. But when her husband Brent reached out to the spa for answers, he claims they put the blame on Sadie, saying she just bruised easily.
I was angry because I felt like she was being reattacked.
Spa here tells Inside Edition that her claims do not align with the facts. They shared this security footage saying it shows the massage therapist leaving the massage room, followed by Sadie, that she did not exhibit any signs of distress or discomfort, and after the massage, she smiled, handed her credit card to the therapist, tipped him, and left the spa without any visible signs of concern. Sadie calls the spa's claims ridiculous and says they're victim shaming her.
I froze, and all that kept going through my head is, am I going to be raped? I just want to go home.
The massage therapist, Zantana Zuniga, was charged with indecent assault and fired by the airport spa. His license was recently revoked. I caught up with him outside a Dallas pizza joint. Sadie Colves says that you sexually assaulted her during a massage at the airport. Is that true? He drove away. So what can you do to stay safe during a massage? I spoke with Felicia Brown, a massage therapist who often testifies in massage abuse cases. What should someone do if they feel like their massage therapist is touching them inappropriately?
If you're uncomfortable for any reason, whether it's because you're in pain or you don't like something or it feels inappropriate, you should speak up and let the therapist know.
Is it ever appropriate for someone who wants to receive a massage to say, I would prefer a female massage therapist?
Absolutely. If you are a woman or a man and you don't feel comfortable receiving massage from a particular gender therapist, then it's absolutely okay to ask for someone you are going to be comfortable with.
According to an incident report sent to us by the spa, the masseuse said he, quote, never touched her inappropriately.
But in all fairness, who could be lying here? The victim or the person that touched her? I would say you'd be the judge in this case, but the court records would show something different. The bottom line here is this: just don't ever let that happen again to you. And if that ever happens to you, just file a victim report and and you'll know what happened. We'll tell them what happened, sorry. Alright. I got something to say about this one here. It's just, look, basically because you're a massage therapist, doesn't give you the right to assault somebody. I mean, I get you're trying, I mean, massage therapy should be equal genders. A male massages massages a male person, while a female massage therapist massages a female patient. You could probably get the picture here, and if it doesn't make sense to you, well, maybe this story should. And you know, I never went to massage therapy, but if I did, I would ask if I would ask for a male massage person. But if it was a woman, then the whole tune would be different. The whole tune of this, it would be different. Someone in the common courtesy step into the plane and say, you know what, we made an error and it's time we're to fix this. And we still can't fix it, even if this is the land of second chances, which it is. Every time, every day. Still ahead, Project Baltimore with a substitute teacher who denied an allegation. You'll hear that story. Please stay with us. This is going to be one of those seeing to believe it stories, which you'll only see on this broadcast. But it's the first we're ever dealing with this. Could you ever imagine like a bear attacking your car because, you know, looking for food? But then you claim insurance on it. But what if you realized that it wasn't actually a bear? It was actually someone dressed up as a bear. If this was one of the worst insurance scams, this would be it. Tonight, you're about to meet that person who claims that this bear attacked the car. And why people are saying it's the worst, it's a story you got to see to believe. Here's Stephen Fabian.
Caught on camera, it looks like a giant bear ransacking a Rolls Royce. And here a massive beast appears to tear apart a Mercedes. Now a ferocious bear seems to be at it again, ripping into another Mercedes. How could a bear target 3 cars on the same property in Lake Arrowhead, California? Turns out it's alleged to be a giant hoax. Authorities say it was actually a human wearing a bear costume, much like this one, using sharp metal-like claws to scratch up the interior of the cars. And then that fraudulent insurance claim was turned in.
One of the wildest, dumbest alleged fraud schemes I've ever heard of.
The California Department of Insurance released this photo of the bear costume, and kitchen meat shredders they say were used to pull off a $141,000 insurance fraud claim. Operation Bear Claw led them to the arrest of 4 suspects. So, how were they caught? Alright, so here I am in the bear costume, digging around in the back seat of the car here, and as hard as I try, it's pretty difficult to mimic the exact motions of a bear. Look closely at the surveillance footage. Do those arm motions look like those of a real bear? And check out those wrinkles in the bear costume. One more thing. This is what a car typically looks like after a real-life bear attack. Totally trashed. Not neat little scratches like these in this alleged fraud.
All 4 suspects are charged with insurance fraud and conspiracy.
If I had to bring Keenan and Coda into this broadcast, they would roar at those insurance scams saying, don't you dare do that. It's wrong to do so. And even so, it is very wrong to do so. And look, I get the facts here, you know. I get these facts. I mean, I'm not part of an insurance scam, but if I were, that'd be a whole different story. And clearly it's just, you know, it's dumb. Really, it's just dumb to look at. Imagine if it was a bear hopped up on cocaine. That'd be different. Okay. I probably got nothing better to say. I got nothing better to say. So, you know what? Because seriously, I mean, this is one of the dumbest things that I've seen on this broadcast. Before we continue on, I want to congratulate my good friend Keelan Paxton for going into District 4. Alright. Look at these multiple crashes that have happened in SPID.
The third time this week, for the third time this week, Corpus Christi police had to shut down parts of SPID for a crash. Today's happened near the Ayers exit near the Trade Center just before 9 a.m. Drivers were asked to reroute as police cleared the highway. At this time, it is unknown if there were any injuries in that crash. And just yesterday, police responded to a 10-car pileup on SPID near Castores. Tuesday morning, yet another pileup on SPID. That one included 9 cars near the Weber exit on SPID.
It just shows to tell you that you need to drive safely. If you drive without a license, then this isn't a video game. This is real life. If you want your license, you gotta work for it. And let me tell you something. I don't have a license. Like we talked about on Friday, you know, I'm driving down the street. My mom's driving down the street. Like I walk the streets. My mom drives in a car, and she has no points in her car. She never gets a ticket. I'm telling you out there, you want to keep your license, you got to obey the rules, even if it means. I mean, I get it. You don't want to follow the rules. I get it. You choose the behavior, you choose the consequences. That's the whole key here, you know. And take it from me personally. I don't drive. I lead by example, which our parents taught us when we were kids. You were raised to be a leader, not a follower. If your friends, you're gonna listen to your friends. Okay, like if your friends tell you to jump off a bridge, would you do it? Let me answer that. That's a rhetorical question. You already know the answer to that. No, you wouldn't dare. I mean, your mom and dad raised you to be a leader, not a follower. It's basically like this, you know. I'm a leader, and if I had to follow, well, so be it. You know. So be it. Wouldn't even know. Okay. Baby Gregory would have been 31. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when we return, it's the story of baby Gregory, with 2 parents who have been falsely charged for child abuse. But the question is, you know, what happened? Chris Hansen takes a second look into the baby Gregory case. And later, the story of a substitute teacher from Project Baltimore. You gotta see this to believe, and Chris Paps has that story. Stay with us.
Convinced that your department did the right thing in this case? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. No question. No question. And thus far, you have seen no evidence from the Bryant Bruces indicating to you that you made a mistake. Correct. But the Bryant Bruces say they will fight to the end.
And no matter what anybody else out there says about what they think we did, God, ourselves, and Gregory
and Bruce family said that a court date for entering the new medical information on baby Gregory will be set sometime within the next few weeks. In the meantime, the 21-month-old child is living with a foster family in Tennessee.
We are nearing the approach of the 30th anniversary of the baby Gregory incident. Now, this report you just saw was the very first. A bit later, in just a minute, we're going to show you the update. But could you ever imagine that you would be falsely accused of child abuse, even though you would know that it was shaken baby syndrome? What is shaken baby syndrome? It was talked about on Dr. Phil. On Dr. Phil Primetime. I'm not going to show you a clip because then the YouTube channel could easily copyright me. But could it ever be junk science? Well, in order to look back at the baby Gregory case, you also have to look back at what happened last month. You may remember Robert Robertson, sorry. If you don't know what happened, Robert Robertson was sentenced to death for murder of a baby. On Thursday, Robert Robertson is set to become the first person in the U.S. to be executed on the basis of shaken baby syndrome. Controversial medical evidence is distributed by legal theory and it's divided courts, doctors, lawyers, and law enforcement with some calling it junk science. And others continue to embrace it as key to identifying and stopping child abuse. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals and Texas Board of Pardons and Parole have rejected Robinson's plea for clemency. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, legal experts, and even the detective who originally investigated Robinson's case are making a series of last-minute Hail Mary efforts to try to save his life by challenging the conviction under junk science law. Junk science was started in the 1980s. Shaken baby syndrome was started back in the 1980s. It was really diagnosed when doctors detected what's known as the triad of symptoms: unexplained bleeding in the brain, bleeding in the retinas, and brain swelling. It wasn't Britain. Child abuse grew in 1993, which is the example which we're going to show you in just a minute. The American Academy of Pediatrics declared it a clearly definable medical condition. Since Robertson was convicted in 2002, a lot more science has emerged about the diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome. In 2009, the American Academy of Pediatrics widened the shaken baby syndrome to abuse head trauma. What does the court say? Well, they recently affiliated shaken baby cases rejected by courts across the country. The Michigan Supreme Court overturned 2006 shaken baby murder conviction of 2 Ohio cases. Last year in New Jersey, no study has ever elevated the hypothesis that shaking a child could cause the triad of symptoms. In 2016, the Texas Court of Appeals halted Robinson's execution under the junk science statute, but in 2023 decided to doubt the surrounding case. The current state legal feels around his diagnosis is clearly contradictory. Sorry. But let me give you an example. There you are. If I had a teddy bear, it'd be a good example. With this could be a great example. So if I'm shaking the baby like too hard, see how hard I'm shaking? I would shake the baby so hard. I mean, if I shook this baby, if this was a baby, this was an actual baby, and I shook it real hard, this would be the brain, this would be the eyes bleeding all down. So if you look at the eyes, it would bleed all down. There's another case of this, Alagille syndrome, which in the baby Gregory case, which we're about to show you in just a minute. But what you have to understand here is, shaken baby syndrome is not junk science. It has been proven in court. But could you ever imagine being falsely accused of child abuse and then later going through hell and high water just to prove that your baby had a real medical condition? Tonight you're going to meet two parents. You'll meet two parents who have been accused of child abuse with twists and turns, charges, counter charges. It's basically all courts in the state of New Jersey. As we first showed you when we did an issue all about the difference between child abuse, child neglect, and all the other types of stuff, this would probably take the case. And as we take a second look, keep in mind and compare and contrast Baby Gregory with Robert Robertson. And see who would you compare it to, who would be falsely accused and who would be accused. Here's Chris Hansen.
Last March, the congregation at this Atlanta church gave its support and its contributions to a couple who seemed to have it all. Cheryl Bryan Bruce is a doctor, a resident at Morehouse School of Medicine. Her husband Greg is a former Army helicopter pilot, a decorated veteran of the Gulf War. But for 19 months, the Bryan Bruces have been living under a shadow of suspicion and doubt, living under an accusation of child abuse, and living without their terminally ill child who was taken away.
They took my child from me during a time in his life when I could have loved him, enjoyed him, and created the memories that would sustain me when he's gone. He's a big boy now.
Baby Gregory was born June 10, 1993, more than 2 months premature at a military hospital in Ohio. It was an emergency delivery, and the baby appeared very sick.
From interacting with the physicians, it was evident that he had problems, and initially they thought he had a faulty or defective heart, and then they very quickly went to, well, he's got some liver problems.
In July of 1993, he was transferred to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital in Nashville, near where his parents then lived. This is where concerns about the baby's well-being were first raised. A hospital document filed in a Tennessee court shows that doctors at that time diagnosed the 3-month-old baby with failure to thrive, and it questioned why Cheryl Bryan Bruce, a physician, did not recognize her baby's, quote, severely malnourished state.
How can they say there was some sort of neglect when they were following this baby on a weekly basis? His weight was being followed on a weekly basis.
Dr. Bryan Bruce claims that allegations about her treatment of baby Gregory stemmed from her questioning of physicians at Vanderbilt.
That's a challenge for them. How dare this young black woman come and question us?
Vanderbilt officials say they cannot comment about the case at all because of strict confidentiality laws. But some of the Vanderbilt doctors involved told Dateline that the racial allegations by Dr. Bryan Bruce are totally false. On December 6, 1993, baby Gregory was almost 6 months old. His parents say that night he fell off a bed as Dr. Bryan Bruce was about to diaper him. The next day, Dr. Cheryl Bryan Bruce brought baby Gregory back here to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. According to doctor's testimony, a CAT scan showed a large bruise and hemorrhage within the baby's brain. Other doctors say they found bleeding and scarring inside the baby's eyes, injuries consistent with shaken baby syndrome. Doctors believe Gregory had been physically abused. The medical evidence from the doctors at Vanderbilt was brought to the Tennessee Department of Human Services. Charles Wilson is director of Family Services.
This is an extraordinarily serious form of child maltreatment. It can cause death, it can cause brain damage, it can cause all sorts of serious long-term complications for children.
And then, on December 23, 1993, a court order transferred custody of baby Gregory from the family to the state of Tennessee. The Bryan Bruces say they were shocked.
I would have sense enough if I were doing horrendous things to my child, or if my husband was doing horrendous things to my child, not to parade him up under other physicians for fear that someone would see something.
Is there any possibility that Gregory could have been abused by a nanny,
No,
a relative,
no,
another child?
no.
For more than a year, the family only saw their child on court-sanctioned visits. Then, Dr. Cheryl Bryant-Bruce took matters into her own hands. In February, during a visit with baby Gregory in Nashville, she told social workers she was going to take him for a walk. Instead, she fled with the baby here to the Atlanta area.
What drove you to do that?
The fear that if I didn't do anything, that my child would die in the hands of the state of Tennessee.
She brought baby Gregory to Eggleston Children's Hospital for a crucial battery of tests. Dr. Brian Bruce hoped to show that baby Gregory's condition was caused by his liver disease, a rare disorder known as Alagille syndrome. After the test, the baby was taken back to Tennessee. For the Brian Bruces, it was a heartbreaking moment.
They were snatching him back out of our lives, and I think that that has to have been one of the worst moments in my life. The first being the first day they took him from me.
3 months after that interview came a dramatic development in this story. On June 12th, a Tennessee judge gave baby Gregory back to his parents. Overturning 2 earlier rulings, the judge relied on testimony from doctors at Eggleston Hospital who said baby Gregory's condition was very possibly the result of his liver disease, not abuse.
We want to applaud the judge for making a courageous decision.
John Mayhew is one of the Bryant Bruce's attorneys.
What was the evidence that allowed you to bring this baby home to its parents?
It was twofold. One, this child has a very rare condition called Alagille syndrome that affects 1 out of every 70,000 births. Number 2, this child also had documented bleeding disorders that could cause this child to bleed in its brain and in its eyes. And those conditions existed since birth. And we were able to convince the judge that those conditions were always there.
The Tennessee Department of Human Services issued a statement reacting to the ruling, expressing surprise at the court's decision. It also says the department is considering if any additional legal action is appropriate. Baby Gregory is now living at the Bryant Bruce's Atlanta area home, along with the family's 2 other children.
There was just this overwhelming sense of fulfillment and rightness about it all.
Almost like a dream, come true. Just too enormous to believe. And just waking up that following morning and having him right there in the bed with us was incredible. It was just unbelievable, that it was really true.
But along with the joy, there is also some anger and bitterness over what they've been through.
It's bad enough to wrongfully remove a child, but then to, over a period of 19 months, treat us as if we were common criminals, misfits in this society, was the ultimate slap in the face.
What has this 19 months done to your family?
It's been a roller coaster. We've been probably through every emotion imaginable to man, and then created a few of our own.
It brought us to the point where we couldn't even touch, because, my touch wasn't what my wife required. She wanted to be with Gregory, and I understood that.
The Bryant Bruces say they've paid a high price, but that the one who has suffered the most in this case has been baby Gregory himself.
Gregory paid the biggest price. We hurt, but we had each other. Gregory was out there all by his little, tiny, lonesome self.
Baby Gregory's best hope for the future is a liver transplant, but sadly, that's not an option right now because his physical development has been so dramatically slowed by his disease. Gregory's long-term prognosis remains uncertain. One final note, Vanderbilt University Hospital, which first raised the issue of abuse in this case, stands by its original diagnosis.
It wasn't abuse. It was a condition. You're going to put away a child because of a medical condition? There's a difference between child abuse. If you're leaving marks or bruises, that's child abuse. Child neglect is when you leave a child behind. without any babysitter. If you ever seen the movie Home Alone, you know what I'm talking about. You know, a little boy is left home alone. That's child neglect. It can get you in a lot of trouble. Start realizing the fact that, you know, abuse can happen even if you leave marks and bruises. There's a difference between medical conditions and abuse. Marks and bruises, what the doctors diagnose you or your child with. When we return, Project Baltimore and the substitute teacher. Stay with us. Throughout the past several days of this broadcast, since last week, we've been focusing on crisis in our schools. We even developed a series called Crisis in Our Schools, where the biggest city ever that has been affected by who has been giving children poor education is Baltimore City, Baltimore, Maryland. The state of Maryland, in Maryland, they have a city in Baltimore which the Baltimore City School District will not even talk to Fox 45 because all the allegations being brought against them. And they reinstatement saying in part, you know, this, that, and the third. Now you're about to meet a substitute teacher who's accused of an unsafe incident, but she says she never worked at the school. Here's Chris Papps.
Jen Reedholm sat down with Project Baltimore.
Yeah.
Because she's out of options.
I don't know why I can't get a straight answer.
For 6 years, she's been fighting to clear her name.
There's an incident attached to me that doesn't belong to me.
A fight against her own employer, Baltimore County Public Schools.
That makes no sense. But Baltimore County Schools doesn't seem to make a lot of sense most of the time.
Reedholm began substitute teaching for BCPS in 2017. Specifically, she wanted to work at Warren Elementary in Cockeysville, her community school, where her own children went.
It was in my neighborhood. I knew the community, I knew the children, I knew the teachers.
Warren Elementary, like many schools, struggles to find substitute teachers, and Reedholm wanted to help. But after getting her teaching certificate, she noticed she wasn't getting any job opportunities at Warren. Not understanding why, she started asking questions and learned her name was on the Do Not Use list.
What did you think when you found out that you were on the Do Not Use list?
I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to know why. Why would I be on such a list? I mean, what could I have done ever?
For the next 5 years, Reedholm tried multiple times to have her name removed, but all of her attempts failed because the initial principal who put her on the list in 2017 left the school, and each principal since has relied on that 2017 account of what happened. Finally, in October 2022, Reedholm learned why she was put on the list in the first place when she received this letter from BCPS Central Office. The letter described an unsafe incident that occurred. According to the letter, she left the class she was responsible for unattended while working at Warren Elementary. But Reedholm says that never happened. It's impossible. For one reason.
I never substituted at the school, and I have proof.
The district has not told Reedholm the exact date of the alleged incident, making it more difficult for her to disprove. But this is Reedholm's online employment history. And you can see, according to BCPS's own records, she never worked at Warren Elementary.
What do you want?
I want my record cleared, and I want to be removed off the Do Not Use list.
Project Baltimore reached out to Baltimore County Schools asking why Reedholm was on the Do Not Use list when she never taught at Warren Elementary. We received this reply. Baltimore County Public Schools cannot discuss personnel matters. We encourage Ms. Reedholm to follow up with the Division of Human Resources for further assistance. Reedholm has contacted BCPS again. She hopes to quickly resolve this issue, which she says has cost her family a lot of money in lost work.
Maybe $20,000 to $30,000.
That you missed out on?
Yeah, missed job opportunities.
It's a lot of money.
It is.
But perhaps more importantly, Reed Holmes' name is attached to something she says she didn't do, and she wants it fixed.
I don't know what the future holds, but if there's something on my personnel file that doesn't belong to me and it could come up in a job interview, that's a problem. How am I supposed to explain that?
Reed Home, as we mentioned, was on the do not use list at Warren Elementary for 6 years. But during that time, she was still allowed to teach at other schools. If somebody did something so bad they were banned at one school, why would they still be allowed to teach at other schools? I'm Chris Pabst. Thanks for watching. Here's another story to watch. Also,
probably nobody would ever knew. So this substitute was a victim in this case, so we probably will never know. Even then, nobody ever get a question and answer. We're going to take a break. I'll be right back. We're still focusing on the Baltimore City School District and why it's failing its children, failing education, meaning the school is failing to educate kids because of all the allegations brought up by Fox 45 and Chris Pabst. Well, tonight he's back talking about a new superintendent and why it felt very rushed to even have a new superintendent put in place. You're about to hear what happened from members of the community. Did they have anything to do with this, or is there something going on that we probably won't know? Here again is Chris Pabst.
I remember when Baltimore County Public Schools, we were at the top of the state.
On July 1st, Dr. Miriam Yarbrough is set to take over as the new superintendent of Baltimore County Public Schools, the largest district in our region, with 111,000 students.
It is my intention to work together with you, the community.
Yarbrough began her career as a Baltimore County teacher in 1996 and later became a principal in Montgomery County before returning to BCPS in 2020. She's currently Deputy Superintendent to Dr. Darrell Williams, who after a turbulent 4 years is leaving on June 30th. His replacement was announced by the school board Tuesday night.
Congratulations on your appointment, Dr. Yarbrough.
But in the past decade, the superintendents chosen by the board haven't worked out too well. Current superintendent Dr. Williams is leaving after 4 years. His first contract was his only contract. Prior to Williams, there was interim superintendent Berlita White. She was found to have violated ethics rules regarding her finances. Before White, there was Dallas Dance, who served 4 months in jail for lying on his financial disclosure forms.
and now the board has selected Dr. Yarbrough, who just a few weeks ago was mentioned in a wrongful termination lawsuit that was filed by the district's former chief human resources officer. This has some questioning the process. When a new superintendent is chosen by the school board, it's done in secret. The finalists' names are not made public by the board, and the final vote is held in a closed meeting.
I would love for the public to be more involved. BCPS has been less than transparent with parents for a very long time.
Amy Adams is president of the Baltimore County Parent Coalition.
I don't know why we can't know the resumes of the people that are going to lead our very diverse and very challenged school system.
In announcing the new superintendent, the board issued a press release thanking stakeholders for participating and providing insights throughout the process, saying this outcome would not have been possible without the active participation of the community. But Adams says the public was invited to fill out surveys and attend meetings with a recruitment company conducting the search.
That's right.
Parents were never able to meet the finalists.
What our system now needs is stability and leadership, and this is kind of the opposite of that. There's just a lot of questions. It felt very rushed.
Lily Rowe, a former Baltimore County School Board member, supports keeping candidate names private.
You would have people who wouldn't apply because they wouldn't want their current employer to know that they're looking for another job.
But other school systems in Maryland don't seem to agree. Last year, Wycomico and Washington counties hired new superintendents. Both districts publicly announced the finalists prior to the board voting. Harford County Schools released a list of finalists in 2018.
The Board of Education are looking forward to working with you and supporting you throughout your tenure as superintendent of BCPS.
The Baltimore County School Board says it's planning to hold a series of public meetings where the community can meet Dr. Yarbrough before she begins a new job. But the decision has already been made. She's set to be the next superintendent. The question now is whether she will be more transparent than her predecessor.
And as far as the media is concerned, you will make yourself available.
I will make myself available.
In 4 years, Dr. Williams agreed to only one interview with Project Baltimore, his first day on the job. So we sent an email asking if Dr. Yarbrough will make herself available to the media and when the public will see her plan to improve the school system. In a short statement, BCPS said it will release Dr. Yarbrough's plan when it's complete. As far as interviews, BCPS said it'll keep us posted.
We just want what's best for the children. Our kids are in these systems. We depend on these schools. We want our kids to be educated well, to be effective grown-up adults. And we want our teachers to be dedicated, and we want their morale to be really high. And it just doesn't feel that way right now.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Well, we want to know what you think. Should school boards let the public meet superintendent finalists before voting? So far, 91% of voters say yes. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Click on the Project Baltimore tab to weigh in.
I'm Chris Pabst.
I really think they should happen. If you're going to vote for a superintendent, you need to meet them in person. That way, you can ask questions and not go over your head and say, well, let's just vote now and then have the public meet them after the nomination. It's just harsh, you know. You want to be a superintendent, and yet all you let them is people who just don't give a shit. It never happens, and it probably never will. Unless you've known about it beforehand. Alright. Time for another second look. This time, it's all about vehicles. Runaway cars. Cars seem to take off on their own. It's called sudden salvation. It first grabbed headlines in the early 1980s. The federal government investigating it now, and now it has those fines tonight. What you're about to hear is some cases involved sudden salvation. Drivers mistakenly hitting the gas instead of the brake, and only one motor company knows about it. Here's Stone Phillips with our Give Me a Break second look.
On June 10th was our church picnic, which was to be a kickoff for Bible school, which is to start the next day.
Pastor Jeff Batet and his wife were looking forward to taking their little boy Nathan to the picnic that Sunday afternoon in 1990. As people gathered at the local park in Nokomis, Illinois, a member of their church hopped into this Ford Aerostar van to run an errand. No one could have imagined what was about to happen.
I just looked up and I heard this engine roar. It had a scream noise to it, like it was going out of control.
Gene Zoller says it suddenly lurched forward. The runaway van crashed through a concrete bench, through picnic tables and wooden pillars, heading straight for his wife Evelyn, a Sunday school teacher and mother of 10. And next to her, asleep in his stroller, Nathan Patet.
Couldn't believe what I seen. And the little boy was laying in a stroller this way.
The front of the van had crushed and killed the baby and the teacher. But there was something about the accident no one could understand. The woman driving the van said, under oath, her foot was on the brake, not the accelerator. And there were 4 witnesses who confirmed it, including Evelyn Aller's daughter.
She had to have her foot on the brake. I've seen the brake lights.
If the driver was hitting the brakes, why did the van take off in the first place? And why didn't it stop? When investigators from Ford and the federal government examined the van, they couldn't find any defects. So in spite of the brake light witnesses, Ford concluded the driver must have made a tragic mistake, slamming the accelerator to the floor instead of the brake. And a jury agreed. It echoed the findings of this 1989 government report. Experts reviewed thousands of accidents involving all kinds of cars, not just Fords. Their conclusion? Pedal misapplication by the driver was the most likely cause, that it was virtually impossible for electrical failures to cause sudden acceleration. And that seemed to close the book on sudden acceleration. For years, car companies pointed to the government report and won nearly every lawsuit against them. But lately, there have been a few bumps on the road to blaming drivers. Although the automakers still deny it, juries in 3 different states have ruled that defects in cars were to blame in cases against Audi, Nissan, and General Motors. And as you'll see in the most recent and controversial ruling of all, a judge in Ohio says the Ford Motor Company may have covered up one possible cause of sudden acceleration for nearly a decade. Tonight, a new look at sudden acceleration. Dateline has discovered things you've never heard before.
All of a sudden it took off.
Highly trained drivers, even Secret Service agents, who swear they did not hit the wrong pedal.
The 2 wires.
A veteran Ford mechanic who thinks he found a clue to the cause. And internal Ford memos describing wiring problems that could trigger a car to take off on its own. First, a few things you should know. We're talking about a design in some older Fords up until 1995, not the new models in showrooms today. You should be aware that by any measure, sudden accelerations are extremely rare. In recent years, complaints have been falling. Finally, almost everyone agrees some people do hit the wrong pedal. The question is, does everyone? Did this man hit the wrong pedal? After the Reverend Leon Manigault led a Pentecostal church service like this one in Cleveland, his family says his car suddenly sped out of the church parking lot.
My father said the car had just shot off.
Manigault's son John says his father's foot had to be on the brake because he chased the car down the street watching the brake lights flash until his father turned off the key and killed the engine.
He said that's the only way that car stopped.
These repair records show the family complained to a local dealer that the car accelerates by itself. And a few months later, they say it happened again with tragic consequences.
Taking your shoes off.
Today, the Reverend Manigault is in a coma after the same Ford Crown Victoria roared out of his driveway and into the back of a house. He suffered massive head injuries. His family sued Ford in a case that challenges the carmaker's claim that drivers are to blame.
So mysteriously, we have all these people who are slamming down the throttle pedals. But I can't buy it. Is this correct?
Sam Serro is an electrical engineer hired by the Manigault's lawyers to investigate the crash. And he developed a new theory, how the cruise control can cause some cars to take off without anyone hitting the gas. For years, investigators didn't think cruise controls could be much of a factor in sudden acceleration, in part because they thought the system didn't get any power until you got up to speed and turned it on.
This is a connector.
But when Serro investigated, he found that in tens of millions of Ford-built cars and trucks, some but not all models from the mid-'80s all the way up to 1995, the cruise control is getting power as soon as you turn on the engine, even if you've never touched the cruise control button.
Has instant vehicle power.
Even if the switch is off up on the steering wheel.
Even if the switch is off, yes.
Serro says that's asking for trouble, because with the power always on, a rare combination of 2 specific wiring problems, shorts, happening simultaneously, can activate the cruise and send the engine to wide open throttle, full power, even from a dead stop.
This thing can, without you wanting.
We got part 2 real quick.
This thing can, without you wanting it to, it can pull wider than throttle.
Have you tested this on a real car?
Several times, yes.
Serro deliberately rewired an old Ford Crown Victoria, adding switches and a system could flip to produce the 2 wiring problems. In this demonstration, played in an Ohio court, the driver puts the car into gear and without touching the accelerator, flips the switch. The car takes off, picking up speed, the throttle wide open. Cyril says you don't have to be a mechanic to understand how it could happen without the switches he added.
This black wire here is a ground.
If this black wire to one part of the cruise control wiggles loose, and then if either one of these two wires gets a nick in the insulation and touches metal in the car, Cyril says, hold on. And there's another thing. If this $4 plastic switch, called a dump valve, because it cuts off the cruise control as soon as your foot hits the brake, if it too fails, Cyril says the engine stays wide open. Anyone can rig wires, deliberately short things out. Isn't this a lot of things that have to go wrong all at the same time?
No, and what you're talking about in quotes going wrong, all of these things that go wrong are normal wear and tear on the vehicle.
Cyril says normal vibration can cause a loose wire to make, then break a connection, even though it looks fine.
It's the same problem that you have when you look down at your indicator panel and sometimes the little lights come on to tell you something, and then they'll go off.
So if it was vibration, it might vibrate its way back into order,
Sure.
you're saying?
Yes.
And that other wire that has to be nicked, then touch metal? Well, Cyril says it may not have to touch metal at all if there's water in the wiring. Water?
Yes.
But these wires are under the hood. And what are the chances that water's going to get on these wires?
Probably about 100%.
100%.
Oh, yes.
Cyril says the wiring for the cruise control is right in front of the windshield, so water dripping down or simply condensing on the electronics can cause short circuits. And if water does play a role, Cyril says proving it would be almost impossible because water evaporates.
Right after the fault, it could be gone.
Cyril admits the odds of all these failures happening at once are very small, but with millions of cars on the road, even rare failures can add up. And he told the jury that's what happened to the Reverend Manigault's car.
I mean, you're talking, what, 1/100 of 1% of all the vehicles? It's very low probability. You say that doesn't sound too bad, but if it's your car, it's real bad, isn't it?
What did Ford say about all this? In court, the company argued that the Manigault family had changed experts and changed theories. Before Cyril, another expert had offered an entirely different explanation because he didn't find any problems with the Manigault's cruise control. And the fact is, Sam Cyril didn't either, because before he or Ford engineers could inspect the car, it disappeared from a storage lot. Ford declined Dateline's request for an on-camera interview. But in this letter, the company told us essentially what it told the jury, that Sam Cyril's test was a contrived stunt with a doctored vehicle. His demonstration, junk science. If real failures caused an accident, Ford said it would leave evidence for investigators to find. Have you ever seen it in a specific car where you haven't created it?
The problem has always been that by the time I get to see a vehicle, it's had a head-on collision. It's been so smashed up that you can't tell anything from it anyway.
Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't, not yet.
Ford says Sam Cyril was paid to come up with a problem, and a Ford expert testified that although Cyril's explanation is theoretically possible, in the real world, that can't happen. It just doesn't happen. And Ford showed the jury a test of its own, demonstrating that even if those short circuits sent the engine wide open, and even if that dump valve failed, the brakes could still stop a runaway car. You can see how the front brakes work, even though the back tires are still turning. After listening to the evidence, the jury ruled in Ford's favor, and the judge rejected several appeals. But the story doesn't end there, because there's a lot that jury never heard. This car didn't crash into just any tree. It's on the White House lawn. The man behind the wheel drove in motorcades with 2 presidents. Dan Childs was an experienced Army driver with a spotless record.
That was kind of frightening.
In 1992, Childs shifted a Ford-built Mercury Marquis into gear to pull in line for a motorcade here at the White House. His commanding officer was in the back seat when suddenly the car roared.
He starts to scream at me that, sir, the vehicle won't stop, the vehicle won't stop, the vehicle won't stop. And I'm looking over the front seat, seeing he is literally standing on the brakes.
Had anything like that ever happened to you before?
No, never.
Were you surprised?
I was very surprised.
Scared?
Yes.
Without touching the gas, Childs says the car took off. And if he hadn't hit a tree, he says he might have plowed straight into the Oval Office. You can see where it happened if you look at the back of a $20 bill.
Just barely right in here, kind of mixing with all the shrubbery.
Childs told Dateline he thinks the brakes worked, but when the front wheels hit the grass, they started sliding, while the back wheels kept pushing the car forward because they were still on the pavement. The key thing is, the engine continued to roar, even though Childs swears his foot never touched the accelerator.
Is there any question in your mind?
No.
About which pedal you had your foot on?
I had my foot on the brake.
And remember, Childs has a witness.
You physically had both feet on the brake pedal.
And within a year, Secret Service agents were reporting similar incidents involving 3 different Ford-built cars, including one at the vice president's home.
I remember getting in it and putting it in reverse, and all of a sudden it took off.
Dropped it in gear, the engine revved up, tires squealing.
And the vehicle weighed probably 10, 15 feet of rubber and above that smooth concrete floor.
Did Secret Service agents suddenly get clumsy and start hitting the wrong pedals? Attorneys suing in a sudden acceleration case Ford settled without admitting fault had tracked down the Secret Service agents and other drivers.
20 feet, the vehicle engine just abruptly revved up. The vehicle accelerated.
A Ford public relations man at company headquarters.
Pulled it in gear, and it took off, spun wheels, as I recall the situation.
When Mrs. Ford entered, I entered the car.
And it even happened to a driver chauffeuring Mrs. William Clay Ford of the company's founding family.
There was a sudden surge. I immediately hit the brake, but the car did not stop.
These records show Ford was getting so many complaints, as many as 100 a month, it had launched its own internal investigation. But the judge in Reverend Manigault's case never allowed the jury to hear about that, or the White House lawn, the Secret Service, or any of the other incidents. What the jury did hear was a Ford lawyer say Sam Sarrow's ideas were purely theoretical and had never happened in the real world. When the Reverend Manigault's lawyer told a different judge that Ford knew about thousands of sudden acceleration incidents, including ones with trained drivers who swear they didn't hit the wrong pedal, the judge issued this blistering ruling, saying Ford had perpetrated a fraud upon the court and may have misled the government. In ordering a new trial, he wrote, "It seems certain that further death and injury is likely to occur unless and until the truth about the causes of sudden acceleration events becomes public knowledge." Ford told Dateline it's appealing what it calls the judge's erroneous and unconscionable rulings. The company says it didn't hide anything, and that its statements in court are absolutely true, that it's investigated every one of the incidents we've told you about, and in some cases the government has as well. And Ford says no one, not even Sam Sarrow, found evidence that a mechanical or electrical problem caused any of those sudden accelerations.
And what we had found was the solder.
But wait till you hear what a mechanic at a local Ford dealership says he found, and what the man who oversaw that government report on sudden acceleration says now, after Dateline showed him these internal Ford records.
It makes you think that there is something more substantive to Sam Sarrow's theory than just theory.
When we return, what this former top Ford investigator says he did not know about the government, the Ford's cruise control system. The mechanics who don't think drivers are always to blame.
Always to blame.
And it happens that fast. That fast. Quicker than you can blink your eye. Okay. Either one of these. Either one.
Please stay with us. Well, as you've seen, there's been plenty of cases involved in Ford's sudden acceleration. Now you're about to meet some mechanics who think otherwise. And see some internal Ford memos that might say something different all about sudden acceleration. Once again, here's Stone Phillips.
By any measure, sudden acceleration is rare, but this mechanic in Boston says he's seen it with his own eyes, not once, but twice.
These are the time marks right here? Still here after all these years.
Junior D'Amato says one day outside his shop, he heard a crash. A woman's car had just hit a school bus. The back tires were still spinning.
We saw the tire smoking,
and we saw the brake lights on at the same time.
So she had her foot on the brakes.
The brake lights were on.
And within months, another customer brought in a different Ford-built car, complaining it too had taken off. D'Amato says he left that car idling outside his shop with nobody inside to press any pedal.
All of a sudden, the engine started to scream and roar.
It just started to roar.
Just like someone was in it and put it right to the floor, yes.
Junior D'Amato is more than a mechanic. He writes a weekly column about auto repair syndicated in newspapers across the country. When he called Ford back in 1991 to report the problem, the company sent out an investigator, but told D'Amato it couldn't find a problem with the car.
All we're going to do is just loosen it.
So years later, when D'Amato heard about Sam Serro's short-circuit theory, he says he decided to try it for himself. He showed Dateline how he deliberately loosened that first black wire to the cruise control.
I just unplugged it.
We started the van, but left it in park so it wouldn't actually move. Then we watched as D'Amato deliberately nicked the insulation on one of those other two wires, then grounded it.
And it happens that fast.
That fast. Quicker than you can blink your eye.
It's either one of these
Either one. That's one wire. And this is another wire.
Now, is that actually pulling down the gas pedal?
It'll actually move the gas pedal.
Now, as long as that continues to be there, this is going to keep revving.
Remember, the van's not taking off because we never put it in gear. And the engine is roaring, even though D'Amato never turned the cruise control button on. He didn't have to. Ford admits that in some, but not all, of its models built before 1995, the cruise control is always getting power, even at a dead stop.
Does your experience tell you that this is a reasonable explanation for the sudden acceleration incident?
I would have to go with that assumption, yeah.
Of course, Junior D'Amato didn't find those shorted wires. He created them. But Dateline discovered there's another mechanic who did find something. A wiring problem on a Ford that had suddenly accelerated through a parking lot. Long before engineer Sam Serro was involved in sudden acceleration lawsuits, Larry Miller was the service manager at this Ford dealership in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. In 1990, a customer came in complaining that his new Ford Aerostar had suddenly taken off by itself.
There was no question in his mind.
No question.
His foot was on the brake.
Correct.
Never on the accelerator.
Correct.
Robert Mull was driving. His wife Sally was sitting next to him.
And we just flew. We were hitting speed bumps.
After bouncing over the bumps, she says the runaway engine quieted down as mysteriously as it had roared. So Miller says he called Ford's national hotline for help. This is a written record of that call from Ford's own files. It shows how Miller reported the van took off through a parking lot after the engine went to full throttle. The first recommendation from Ford headquarters? Check for chafing on wires from speed control amp to servo. The same wires Sam Serro says could cause problems. And Dateline discovered Ford wasn't just telling Miller. Remember how the pedal moved by itself when the cruise control kicked in? This is another Ford hotline report, same year. A Ford dealer from Virginia calls. Customer says vehicle went to wide open throttle and he could not hold it with the brakes. The recommendation from Ford headquarters? Question customer as to whether the accelerator pedal actually moved or not. If so, check the wiring between the speed control amp and the servo for shorts. Now remember, Ford told that jury back in Ohio that it never found a case in the real world where wiring shorts had caused sudden acceleration, that it just doesn't happen. So why would experts at Ford headquarters be telling a mechanic in the field to check the wiring? Ford told Dateline it was simply telling mechanics about every possibility, however remote.
Where these wires were touching.
But it turns out, when Larry Miller started checking wires, he actually found something. We don't have the original cruise control, so on another one, Miller showed Dateline where 8 years ago, he'd found two wires hidden inside, nearly touching.
The solder joint coming off of this wire had dripped down to where it was almost touching the gray black wire. And our contention is that when he put it in gear, it jerked just enough to make contact with those wires.
That's just one of the things that would have to have gone wrong. But Miller thought he'd uncovered an important clue.
There's not a doubt in my mind that that's what caused this one.
And he reported it back to the hotline.
Dealer called back to
This all happened when Ford says it was in the midst of a massive and expensive investigation of sudden acceleration. But instead of checking the van for itself, Ford closed the case.
So nobody from Ford came out to see firsthand for themselves what you reported over the hotline?
No. In a letter to Dateline, Ford defended its decision to close the case, finding its car was not to blame. Although Miller may have identified one of the 5 malfunctions that must happen simultaneously, Ford said he didn't find the others. But was Ford already hearing about the other malfunctions, which combined could cause sudden acceleration? Dateline reviewed internal Ford documents, including this one, written 3 years before Larry Miller's call. It lists the problems in some of Ford's cruise controls, including water in the amplifier, open circuits. And remember that plastic dump valve cutoff switch on the brakes? Pinched dump valve hoses. Ford told Dateline it was just a routine list to improve performance, and that Miller didn't pinpoint any of those problems. When all of the facts are considered, the company says, it is clear that Ford acted appropriately when it closed its investigation. But take a look at what this internal Ford memo was saying back in 1990. Even as Ford closed the case, a Ford zone manager was summing it up saying, Larry Miller eventually found a fault in the cruise control which could have caused a sudden acceleration.
All right, the final part.
We found some Ford documents. Dateline took the Ford memos to Michael Brownlee, the former director of defects investigation for the government agency that regulates auto safety. After nearly 20 years with the agency, he left in 1997 to become a private safety consultant. And you should know he has testified as an expert against Ford on an unrelated issue. Brownlee is the man who oversaw that same government report Ford has been pointing to for years to back up its claim that drivers, not cars, are to blame. So did that report really close the book on sudden acceleration?
Do you still believe that pedal era accounts for all of these cases?
No, that's never been my position. That was not the position of the government. The government's position was that a large percentage of these problems are caused by pedal misapplication.
So you're saying that while pedal error may have been the most likely cause, it may not have been the only cause?
That's correct.
Although Ford says it was no secret and should have been clear from the information it gave the government, Brownlee says there's an important fact about Ford's old cruise control design he didn't know.
Were you surprised to hear that the cruise control in millions of Fords was getting power, even if it's off?
Yes, that is a surprise to me, and I don't think I was aware of that 10 years ago, and I don't believe our investigators were either.
And if the problems are caused by vibration and water, as Zero claims, could that explain why they might go undetected? Does that make any sense to you?
Well, certainly, water is present in the environment of a vehicle, under the hood and elsewhere. Vibration is a fact of life in vehicles.
So that could explain why the evidence would be so hard to find.
Well, sure, it heals itself. The water can go away, the water will evaporate. I'm going to throw a switch.
While Ford still maintains Samsero's theory requires a combination of failures that's virtually impossible, Brownlee's not so sure.
Is this a theory that you looked into when you were investigating this?
This is a simpler way for it to fail than that was looked by the government at that time. From a technical standpoint, certainly it's plausible. And that's based not only on Sam Sero's opinion, but other electrical engineers that I have talked to about this.
Brownlee is not endorsing the short-circuit theory, but after reviewing some of the records Dateline found, he says he has a lot more questions he'd like to ask Ford.
It makes you think that there is something more substantive to Sam Sero's theory than just theory.
But there's one other lingering question in this mystery we wanted to ask Brownlee about. Even if short circuits in the cruise control could explain why a car would take off by itself, and even if a problem with that plastic dump valve might explain how an engine could stay at full throttle, what about the brakes? Remember that Ford test? It's compelling evidence. Ford says even if everything does go wrong, the brakes will still stop a car, even with a runaway engine. But we watched the test again. Listen carefully at the end. He's shouting 175 pounds of pressure. That's how hard Ford's test driver pushed on the brake and held it down
to stop the car. That's roughly 10 times harder than you'd normally have to push. So hard, even that government report on sudden acceleration concluded that 50% of all women, and even some men, just can't do it.
Bottom line here is that that's a lot of pedal force, and not everybody can push that hard.
Remember the witnesses at that church picnic accident who saw brake lights?
I've seen the brake lights.
So in some of these cases where people say, we saw brake lights, and the driver says, my foot was on the brake, is it possible that they just weren't pressing hard enough, or perhaps couldn't press hard enough?
Yeah.
Bring the car to a stop.
Yes, that is possible.
Could that explain why a van driven by a grandmother didn't stop? Or why 67-year-old Reverend Manigault didn't stop his car? We don't know. What we do know is those Ford hotline reports were talking very specifically about wiring problems that might cause sudden acceleration. And after seeing the Ford memos, the man who used to be in charge of safety investigations says the government may want to take a second look.
Clearly Ford had some notion or some basis for thinking that wiring might be the problem. And this is the kind of information that, of course, one would like to find out more about.
Would you think that reopening the investigation might be in order?
Certainly this is something that ought to be looked at, it seems to me.
For now, the controversy is headed back to the courtroom. In Ohio, the Manigault family will learn soon if they'll get a new trial. And in the church picnic case, the families who didn't even know about the short circuit theory have gone back to court asking to reopen their case, still looking for answers.
I needed satisfaction to know that I done something to try to ease the pain for my children and done justice for my wife and so forth.
Dateline sent those internal Ford memos to the federal government, which told us it was aware that cruise control failures could conceivably cause wide-open throttle when it issued its 1989 report. NHTSA says it has not detected a trend in Fords and that there's no basis at this time for opening a new investigation. Remember, the government's 1989 report concluded that driver error is the most likely cause, and it did not find a higher rate of sudden acceleration in cars with cruise controls. In a recent example, a Minneapolis police officer was behind the wheel of a Ford van that took off, killing 2 people. That van did not have cruise control, and federal investigators believe the officer must have hit the wrong pedal. Some people do.
The question is,
does everyone?
That's the question that always need to be answered. Does everybody hit the wrong brake, or did they probably go for hitting the right brake? No one ever knows for sure until they know the actual answer. That's Skin Break for Saturday. I'm John the Carmody. I'll probably see you after Monday, if not before. Stop bullying, speak up, concentration, not strength, no jaywalking. Good night.